In this video, I'll be doing a basic overview on how to run the PixNub HDR effects actions. This video is not going to be in depth. If you need more details, be sure to watch the videos after this. Now, before you get started, if you are doing these on an easy green screen extraction, they'll need to be merged into one layer because easy green screen, the extracted image is actually several layers. Now, you don't have to run these on an extraction, and they can be on any type of image, a landscape or whatever. But if they are on an easy green screen extraction, just go into your panel and select Merge All, and that'll put those on a single layer. Now, you've got the choice between ACR actions, which are just going to run a single ACR filter step. And ACR, by the way, is Adobe Camera Raw. And then you've got the ones that are not called ACR. These will give you several Photoshop layers. It's a little more complex of an action. The effects will be similar, and there are times you'll like each one better than the other, so just experiment with both of them. Now, I'll start out with an ACR action, and these are in strength 1 through 10, so with 1 being the weakest and 10 being the strongest. Usually for a cutout image like this, anywhere between 3 and 7 is where you'll want to stay with for the most part, although you can go stronger or weaker. It just depends on what you want, but I'll start with 5. Just hit play, and then if the strength is too much or too less, then you'll want to undo that, because if you play it again, you'll double up on the effect. So Control Z to undo, and then select a different one and try it. That's pretty much it. You just play the actions until you get the results you want. Now, you can also use the ones below that have the show dialog step checked, and this will pull up the Adobe Camera Raw filter where you can make any changes you want and then apply it, so you can have a little bit of user input there. Now, the ones that are not called ACR actions, these are going to build Photoshop steps, and it's a little more complicated because unlike the ACR, you have to consider the size of the image. Where ACR, the effect is going to pretty much look the same regardless of the actual size of your image. With the Photoshop layers, since those are applied with a certain pixel radius for each effect, smaller images will look different given the same radius. So a smaller image is going to need a smaller radius. And once you experiment with that, you'll kind of see what I mean. But these come in 3 different strengths: standard, weak, and strong. And this effect is actually pretty strong as compared to the HDR if you use it at full strength. So I usually don't use the strong. A weak or standard is typically what I'll use. And if you don't know which radius to use, just try one, and right in the middle, radius of 10 and standard is probably what you'll want to start with. And as you see, this is building some Photoshop layers. And with this, you can dial the strength back. And if you want to try a different effect, you want to throw the entire group away and get back to your single layer. I'm going to go up all the way to 50 in strong, just so I can demonstrate the very highest radius and the very strongest strength. And this is going to be very much over processed, but just so you can have something very visual to see. So the radius is where you see these highlights and shadows. Let me zoom in a little bit here. But the radius of the effect is where you see these broad areas of highlights and shadows being applied. That is your radius. And the strength is how strong this is being applied. And the strength is happening within the individual layers themselves. But just to demonstrate kind of what it's doing, the strength is going to be how strong the overall effect is applied. So a weak at the same radius might look like this. Standard might look like this. And strong is all the way up here. But you can see the width of those effects is the same. That width is 50. Now I'm going to undo this here. Actually, I'm just going to throw this whole thing away because there's multiple steps that happen, so one undo wouldn't have done it. but I'm going to now use the same strength of strong, but I'm going to apply a radius equals 5. Now you can see a much different look. It's still got a strong effect. However, those large widths of the highlights and shadows we saw, those are much more narrow, so it's got a much different look. And so I would say that for this image, we're probably using too strong and too small of a radius here. So that's why I said that standard intent is usually a good starting point. Now let me resize this image just so I can demonstrate here. Let's take this down by a factor of 10, so 400 by 600 pixels. So very, very small image now. Now if I go with a strength of 5, now you can see that it has the look and the appearance almost of what it had at 50 when it was 10 times the size. And that's why I'm saying that the width of that effect is really dependent on the size of the image that you'll need to use. So with an image this small, I mean, this is really a much smaller image than you would ever really use. But if I go down to a strength of 1, that looks like something a little more reasonable. And of course, strong is pretty strong. I would never probably use strong on too much, but just to give a variety of options here. There's strong, medium, and weak. So anyways, that is just the basics here. And please be sure to watch the following videos after this for a more in-depth explanation of all of these actions as well as the presets too.